Right, it is the top of the hour. Welcome to the official Comrades Marathon Novice webinar for 2023. How exciting is that? We are really on the cusp of what I call Comrades season, which kicks off on the 1st of March. So welcome to everybody. Keep on popping in the chat where you are from. Just so everybody knows what's going on, Devlin is going to be moderating the chat. So if if you have any questions, pop them in there. He's going to flag them for me, and we are going to do a full Q&A at the end. We've got a very full speaker lineup. So that does mean that we aren't going to have time to answer our usual questions while we're going. But we've got some great speakers, very exciting, and we want to get through them as quickly as we can, and then we'll get to our usual full Q&A for at least half an hour after the talk. So let me get into the presentation. I am speaking currently. The name is Lindsay Parry. I am known as the official Comrades Marathon coach, and I've been coaching at the top end and across the entire field for the past 15 years. I've been to a couple of Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games. I still have a marathon PB of 2:45, which I'm trying to do something about, and a Comrades PB of 7 hours and 11 minutes, which really only means that I don't have any friends. Right, what you're going to learn tonight, we're going to get you all the Comrades info that you need to know to make sure that you've got your qualifying information, etc., sorted out. We're going to give you all the information you need to finish Comrades. I'm going to do a little sneaky peek of the route. I'm going to talk you through how to choose the right plan. And very importantly, we are going to give you some inspiration to help you get over that finish line, which at the end of the day is what all of this is about. Right, who are you going to be hearing from tonight? First up will be Sifiso Ngoma. He is the guy who runs the social media accounts at Comrades and is in charge of the marketing. He's going to run you through all the information. I'm going to give you a slightly more detailed introduction on everyone as they come up. Lindsay will be speaking tonight. That's me later on. Nikki de Villiers, a dietitian, going to be talking us through recovery nutrition and race day nutrition. Shona Hendricks, who is head of athlete success at Coach Parry and a strength and conditioning specialist, will be talking about strength and conditioning. And then the surprise out the bag, Adele Brudrake ran her first Comrades in 2022, first South African lady across the line, third lady finisher overall. And she is going to talk to you about what it feels like to be a novice. So fantastic lineup and very excited to get into it. So first up will be Sifiso Ngoma. He is the marketing coordinator for Comrades Marathon. He has been the MC of the Stomp Awards in Cape Town. He is the assistant race director for the Pietermaritzburg City Marathon, which is coming up very soon on the 26th. It's coming up on the 26th. And the race director for the Green Trail Run. Welcome, Sifiso, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Welcome and good evening to all our participants on this webinar tonight. To all our novices, welcome to the ultimate human race. I'm just going to go through a few things on the admin. If I may ask Lindsay to put up my presentation as I go through, so that everyone can see what I'm going through. Thank you. Okay. So we are sitting on 109 days before the race day. The race is on the 11th of June. It will be a down run from Pietermaritzburg, and it's going to start at 5:30 and finishing in Durban 12 hours later. Most people have been asking why are we doing a double down run. Just to give everyone an understanding. We have traditionally had our up runs and our up runs as even numbers and down run odd numbers. So in 2010, as we were hosting the World Cup, we had to do the double up run. So we are doing the double down run now to put the race, the number of down runs and up runs in sync. So without wasting more time, what upcoming next for us at the office, we will be having the substitution window period opening on the 10th of March and closing on the 10th of April. So for people who have successfully entered on the race, they will have a period from the 10th of March until 24 March to withdraw their entries. And then from 27 March until 10 April, we will have an entry period. Entries that will be available based on how many people withdrew their entries. They will be on first come, first serve basis. So I want that to be you right there on the 27th at 10 a.m. As soon as we open our entries, just go to your computers and make sure you secure your entry. Or if you know anyone who hasn't entered, who need to secure an entry, they must make sure that on the first day they get their entry because they will be selling very fast. The most important thing that I wanted to run through today, wanted to let everyone know that Comrades Marathon has 5 official charities. So in 1996, Comrades established Amabidi charities to assist different organizations that are fighting social issues that we are facing in South Africa. So since its inception, over 62 million rand has been raised. There are 3 components of Amabidi, or how we assist our charities. One is Race for Charity, which I'm going to explain shortly. And then another component is donation with entries. And last is the Toyota Win a Car competition. So what we do is we, as CMA, we reserve 500 entries for runners who need to raise a minimum of 6,000 rand by the 2nd of May, which will be the period where we will be we will need to have your details on your profile updated. What assists these 500 runners who are by the time who would have raised 6,000 rand will get a chance to improve their seeding to CBED. It doesn't matter if you are on GHE, if you have raised a minimum of 6,000 rand for our charities, you will improve your seeding to CBED. These are our official 5 charities: Community Chest of Durban and Pietermaritzburg, Wild Trust, which has 2 components, which is Wild Ocean and Wildlands. We also have Hillcrest Aid Center, Rise Against Hunger, as well as CHOC, which is Childhood Cancer Foundation South Africa. How to join the Race for Charity, which is the most important one, the most important facet of our fundraising for our charities. You just need to go to www.easyrage.co.za, or if you have a Comrades app, you can go to the app and then go to your profile. If you go to sign in, it's gonna redirect you to EasyRage. Same thing, if you go to Comrades website and go to sign in or log in, it's gonna redirect you to the same screen that you are seeing here, which is easyrage.co.za. What you do is you click on login, you put in your login details, which for some strange reasons, most of you forget your passwords. I don't know how and why, but that's a matter for another day. If you have forgotten your password, there is an option to say you forgot your password, then you can reset your password. Once you press login, you put in your credentials. Then when you are logged into your profile, this is the first screen that you're gonna get into under your dashboard. If you click on edit profile, or right where the blue part where it says com with your reference and then the name, if you click there or on edit, it's gonna take you to the following screen where it's gonna show you. If you browse down, it's gonna show you where you can actually sign up to join charities. If you click on join charity, race for charity, there are 4 things that are going to be required of you. You just need to press yes before you get there, and then of course it's going to be on no. If you say yes, that which means you are agreeing to raise funds for our charities, then it's going to ask you for 4 things. One is to put up your profile picture and select the charity that you would like to raise funds for amongst the 5 that I've mentioned. And then you can tell us a little story why you are choosing that charity, and then how much you are willing to raise for the charity. Once we have done that, always advise that people click yes, so that we can be able to share their contact details with the charities, so that when charities or a charity that we are raising funds for would like to contact you for anything or for assistance, they can be able to contact you. Otherwise, if you click on no, we can't share your contact details with the charity that you are raising funds for. Just like that, we click save, then you will be successfully entered on the race for charity. And in 10 minutes, you will receive a link which you will use to fundraise. Once you have received the link, you can, if you go to Comrades website under race for charity, if you type in your name right there on that search button, your name will appear right on that list. It's going to show you how much you have raised and how much is your target. As you can see there at the moment, we have Derek, who's raising funds for Hillcrest Aid Center, whose target is 22,000. He is already sitting on 20,900. I foresee Derek going far beyond his target that he set. You can always change your target or increase your target once we have reached it before the 2nd of May. So when someone would like to donate for you, or they find your name on the list, this is how it will appear. It will be your profile picture, your name, the name of the charity you're raising funds for. You can also share your link on Facebook or email or Twitter to your followers, or else if someone is donating, they press on donate button. There are various payment options that are there that are offered on the platform. They can pay with credit card or instant payment, or there are various they can see when they click on donate now. The last facet of our raising funds for charity is the Toyota Winner Car competition. So with this on race day, we will announce a winner at 4:45 p.m. just before we close the race. So to get this ticket, you can purchase a raffle ticket from each of our charities, or log into Comrades website under charities tab. You will see, if you click on win a car, there are tickets available online. Each ticket is 50 Rand. It doesn't matter where you are in South Africa. Unfortunately, to our international runners, they can't enter on this competition because it's only for South Africans, as it will be difficult to ship the car to outside of the borders, and there are a lot of restrictions there. So we run the competition for only South Africans. That's it from my side. What I can request is let us all make sure that we make every kilometer count by raising funds for any one of our official charities. Please also follow us on our socials as they appear there. We are available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and also subscribe on our YouTube channel. That's it for me. If you have any question, I will still be here. I will be put your questions on the and then I will answer them offline. Thank you so much.
Righty ho, thanks, Safiso. Now we know all things Comrades, and we know all about the charities. Right. Next up, Comrades, what it's all about. Ultimately, everyone on the call tonight, you could be one of those people. And that is what we want. Even better is we want you to be one of the people inside the stadium. And finally, this must be you. We really want everybody who lines up to get a finisher's medal. We want everybody to finish. That is really the ultimate purpose of the webinars and the roadshows, and why the Comrades Marathon Association put so much effort into them. For the next 12 weeks, really what we want to prioritize is being consistent. Okay? Consistency trumps everything else. We want to make sure that we recover as well as we possibly can. And we want to be doing strength training. Okay. And that is exactly why we've got Nikki and Shona speaking tonight, because nutrition plays such an important role in recovery, and strength training is going to play a vital part in keeping you injury free and helping you perform on the down run. Consistency for me is really what trumps all else. So I'm going to dive into the actual training after Nikki and Shona have spoken. But the real secret to finishing Comrades isn't the total number of kilometers that you've run by the end of the 1 March to the 10th of June training block. It's how consistently you will be able to do them. It's what you're able to achieve week after week, and very importantly, month after month. It doesn't help you chasing a magic number that you've got in your head, and you break down with injury and you miss 3 or 4 weeks of training, and then you come back, you try to rush into it. Now you're panicking because you've missed training. So yeah, it's just really important that what we're after is to build up really, really slowly from January to now. We're going to our peak trainings, but if you've missed steps, then you do not want to jump too big. You want to rather, you're better off doing 40 Ks a week from now until race day and being uninjured than arriving at the start line with injury. And I'm going to share something with you just now that will really drive that point home. But today's webinar is all about giving you the tools to make sure that your week after week, month after month gets taken care of. One of the cornerstones of making sure that you can train and keep up the training you need to train for Comrades is recovery. That is basically split up into 3 key areas for me. Rest. Okay, we should all be taking rest days. Now, rest comes into 2 areas in the training. Okay, the first is that you need to have 1 to 2 rest days built into every weekly cycle. You do not need to, and nor should you be training every single day. So a minimum of 1 rest day, preferably 2 for most of the athletes that are running Comrades, is what you need to be able to rejuvenate and for your body to absorb the training, repair the damage that's caused by the training, and make you a stronger athlete. That is how we get fitter, stronger, and faster. And the second level of that rest is that you need to build in some recovery cycles. Okay, typically I use a 3-to-1. So 3 weeks of building up and 1 week of letting your body absorb that training, but 2 weeks of loading and 1 week of recovery also works well. And then very importantly, every time you do something new, and on this journey, you're going to do a lot of new things. Your first marathon, your first ultra marathon, and so on. And every time you do something new, give your body some rest. I would go with at least 3 days. After first ultra, be tempted to do a week. Possibly look at doing some cross training. So in other words, rest from running, rest from everything for 3 days. After 3 days, instead of running, come back by doing some swimming, doing some cycling, some non-impact exercise. But really give your body an opportunity to recover from that new thing and to absorb it and to get stronger for it. If you load the training too quickly, then you are going to have a problem. Sorry, there was a question just quickly flagged, which is really worth answering very quickly. The session is being recorded and it will be made available it'll be emailed to everybody, and it'll be on the Comrades Marathon website. So everybody who registered for the webinar will have access to the webinar. Right, moving on from rest, the next important thing is sleep in recovery. Now, when I talk about sleep, I'm really cognizant of the fact that not everybody sleeps well or can get to sleep easily. But sleep is incredibly important for recovery. And so what I'm really asking people to do is that during this period, these 12 weeks, is to get it right more than you don't get it right. So if we've got a 7-day week, try and really dial in for 5 days on your sleep. And it's not about being perfect, it's about being better than you are right now. Okay. Again, with sleep, there are 3 particular areas that I like people to focus on. The first, and probably most difficult, is to get off screens. So if you can get off TV, cell phone, tablet, laptop, etc., get off screens for 30 minutes before you go to bed, that makes a huge difference to how deeply you sleep. Okay. That's really the bottom line. The second aspect is getting into bed earlier. You actually need to be sleeping by 10 o'clock to get the full recovery benefit of sleep, to get the full hormone release of testosterone and growth hormone. Okay, so wherever possible, try to get into bed before 10 o'clock. And then the third layer and aspect of it is the darker your room, the deeper you'll sleep. And it's linked to exactly the same thing that interferes with your sleeping patterns when you're on a phone too close to sleep. When there's red light, blue light, or any kind of light, or flashing cell phone or something like that in your room when you're sleeping, your brain essentially thinks that you are sleeping during the day. And that's why you don't go into as deep a sleep. So those are your 3 things. If you can get those things better, not perfect, but if you get them better than you're doing now, you're going to improve the quality of the sleep, you're going to improve the quality of your recovery. And then the final thing is nutrition. Now, nutrition is a talk all on its own. And that is exactly why Nikki is here to talk about it. But honestly, you've got sleep and nutrition are the 2 bases of your triangle. And the better your sleep and nutrition are, the wider that base is and the higher your peak can go in training. And the lower your risk will be of injury, the less likely you are to get sick, the more likely you are to be consistent. So really, this evening, we are providing you with literally the most important pieces of information that you need for improving. So with that, I did get through my slides a little bit quicker. So Nikki, that means you've got a bit more time to emphasize a few things. But Nikki de Villiers, I've been working with her for many, many years. Okay. She graduated as a dietitian at the University of Pretoria and completed a postgraduate diploma through the International Olympic Committee and a master's degree in dietetics. She's been working in the field of dietetics for around 20 years and has been concentrating on sports nutrition for the last 14 years. Just like me, she's worked with plenty of athletes that have gone to multiple Olympic Games. She consults for various PSL, which are local football, professional league football teams, professional rugby teams, the Comrades Marathon Association, and individual athletes of all levels. So without wasting any more time, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody had a meal. Otherwise, this can make you hungry. All right. So let's go in terms of what could possibly go wrong if I do not prepare my nutrition plan. The one thing that you can run into trouble with is dehydration, and we're going to talk a little bit about hydration. We can run out of energy. So usually excessive tiredness, that can be what we call peripheral tiredness. That's that feeling that everything in me wants to go, but I've got no legs. And the other one can be central tiredness. That is where you definitely would ask yourself somewhere through the race, what am I doing here and what am I giving up for this? And the last thing that can really go wrong is gastrointestinal issues. We want to sort that out before we get there. So I'm going to go through the talk in terms of how to prepare your fueling plan and then get to basically the basics of your recovery just at the end of this. Okay, so the fundamentals of a proper fueling plan is you need to be able to answer these questions. Am I fueled enough for my event? And a lot of people will say yes. And when I speak to them, enough is the little word that nobody knows when is enough. So we're going to go and see if I can put some numbers to that. Am I hydrated enough for my event? Yeah, again, we don't know what is enough. And unfortunately, I can't give all of you a blanket recommendation here, but definitely will give you some ideas on what to think of and where to search for answers if you think you are not at the enough stage. And then the very, very important thing is, have I practiced my nutrition enough? And I really want to put emphasis on this, that we start practicing in terms of what we're going to do on the day soon enough, and that we do it often enough so that your gut can get used to what you're going to put into it on the day. Okay, so step one in all of this is we need to start with a plan. We also do acknowledge that plans can go wrong. So we also have to make sure that we are flexible in the application of this plan. But whatever we write on paper to start off with can be totally different in terms of what we write on paper the day before we're going to enter the race. So first of all, get all the information you need. So get when the race starts, get how long before the time you're going to have to be at the start, get what are the restaurants in the vicinity where you're going to stay, what is on their menus, get the temperature closer to the time that you're going to run in, get all the information regarding what is available on the road. All those kind of things is what you need to know before you start with this fueling plan. Then define your targets and calculate your needs. I'm going to go through the calculation of the needs with you tonight. But important to know that everybody's targets is different, and I will mention it as I go through in terms of how you need to adjust. So the targets will be different for everyone out there, and therefore nutrition will be different, and that's why we can't give a blanket meal plan on this forum for everybody to follow. The next thing is, when should I start my plan? I think the sooner the better, because that will give you peace of mind and it will give you lots of opportunity to practice what you're going to do and sort out all the niggles. There's a very fine line between success and failure, especially in these kind of ultra stuff, because we don't train these things every weekend. So therefore, it is really important to be vigilant and really train with it to see what's going to work. In a perfect scenario, we want to start 8 to 12 weeks out, making sure that we now go through the phases that we decide in this 8 to 12 weeks, what are we going to do, in the basically 2 days beforehand. What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What is working? What is not working? What are we going to do the day before? That's why all that information is so important to understand what will be available and so forth. The morning of the race and then during the race. So now is the time to start and figure all these out and not only think about it the week before. So you need to answer these 3 questions for your nutrition plan. What will you eat and drink on the day before? What will you eat and drink on the morning before you go in? And what and how often will you eat and drink on the road whilst you're doing this race? And the answers to these questions needs to be, what am I doing now, in terms of how you're going to practice to make it stick and to make sure that you've got the confidence that whatever you do will work on the day. So just a little bit of an intro, what fuels the run, and this is to get to behind the method of the madness in terms of what we say. So if we look at carb versus fat and the whole fight of should we eat more carbs or should we eat more fat, carbs will definitely win, especially if you are really training hard, and especially for speed. So I will get to that slide now, but it basically means that your carbohydrate and your fat basically combines as fuel sources, but the one that's limited in supply is the carbohydrate, and the one that fuels higher intensity efforts is carbohydrate. Now, we are fully aware that in an ultra marathon, you will not be able to run at a very high intensity this whole race, but it does definitely fuel higher intensity efforts as such. The carbohydrate then is stored as glycogen in the body. The glycogen is basically just the fuel tank where carbohydrates is then sitting. These fuel tanks are really limited, so we won't be able to carbo load and then think we've got a whole tank available for the whole race. These glycogen stores are enough to fuel a run for about an hour and a half, depending on how hard you go. Higher intensity, obviously shorter. If you run a very slow intensity, maybe it will last 2.5 hours, but not much more than that. So therefore, the carbohydrate intake before and during your race really can make a difference in terms of how you're going to feel on the road. So this is where I give you an indication of what is used as a fuel source. Don't worry too much about all the blocks. I want you to be able to just identify for me on as you look at the screen on your left-hand side, the low intensity moving up to high intensity. So the low intensity would indicate a walk or very slow jog, and the high intensity a very fast run. And there you will see when we do a walk or very slow jog, you will see carbohydrate is only about 25% of the fuel that you use. So therefore, if we're going to go slow, we really don't need to overemphasize the intake of carbohydrate. The fat will make up 75% of what the fuel that's provided. I think most of us are not intentionally going to go into a race like the Comrades with this. So maybe most of us will be trying to get to a fast run, and there the carbohydrate usage is about 52% and the fat about the 48% of the mix. It does differ a little bit from person to person in terms of how you are adapted. And then if we run very, very fast, you can see that carbohydrate now makes up about 80% of the mix. So very high need for carbohydrate. It means that if the storage that we have is limited, then it means that we will run into fatigue. And as I said, those fatigues are the big glycogen stores, those tanks. The big ones are in the muscle, and the other one sits in the liver. And therefore, we can experience these two types of tiredness that I've mentioned. So the one is if the muscle glycogen is done and you don't have any of those left, that is where, as I said, everything in you want to go, but you just don't have that gear. You will be able to continue in these circumstances, but you're going to make use of predominantly fat as your fuel source, and therefore you're going to have to decrease your intensity. If you run out of carbohydrate in the liver, that is where the blood glucose or the blood sugar level drops. That usually we call central fatigue. So now the head gets tired and you start with all that negative talk. You also often get blurry eyes because your eyes is really dependent on carbohydrate as a fuel source. And then you also get quite shortness of breath because the red blood cell also needs the carbohydrate. So that's more the central fatigue. Doesn't matter if it's peripheral or central, not a nice place to be at, and sometimes very difficult to get out of this hole at that late stage as such. Okay, so if we look then at the carbohydrates, so the main thing that we want to try and achieve in the pre-race meal is we want to make carb available. But the main problem with carb availability, and I think especially the pre-race meals in itself, is I think, or most of us has been in situations where you're just so nervous that you really cannot get food in. And if I talk about hours before the race, you would think this girl is quite crazy to think that I'm going to eat 4 hours before this race, because most of these races, obviously, that you're doing now is in the morning. Sorry, I'm just on load shedding, so I'm just going to move a light here. But I don't think you need to see me either. So if we're then going to eat 4 hours before the race, I think in Comrades you will be awake 4 hours before, especially if you need to travel, or otherwise your nerves, or otherwise just getting, you're so excited getting to the start. But it means that if I eat 4 hours before, we eat quite a big meal. As we move closer to the race, then we eat smaller amounts. So if you're awake 4 hours before, you eat a big meal that can include fat, it can include protein, but it's carb predominant. With other words, we then eat 4 or 5 slices of toast with maybe an egg or two, but very little fat in that meal, because fat stays in the stomach for a long time. If you move closer, 3 hours before, you eat less fat, less of the protein, more of the carbohydrate. And as you move then closer, we try and avoid fat and protein in those meals. And we'd rather make use of just the carbohydrate meal to try and fuel the race. All right, so I will get to more detail about that. It's just in terms, you need to figure out what now is working for you. So the carbohydrate sources, if I talk about carbohydrate source, always make sure, or think in your mind it can either be a starch thing or a fruit thing. That's where we usually get most of our carbohydrate from. So it can be a big bowl of oats, it can be a fruit salad and yogurt, it can be toast with jam, it can be toast with jam and banana. A lot of people will eat peanut butter on bread with banana, maybe a little bit of honey, and then the rest of the carbohydrate can come through a drink that you're drinking. So either fruit juice or coffee or tea or something that will make you comfortable. Be careful of excessive amounts of fiber if you're not used to it. The same with fruit. So if your gut is not used to fruit and all of a sudden on the morning you eat a big heap of fruit salad, there can be that your gut is not used to this. And that's why it's important to now start training with these principles or do your races with these principles. Although, as I said, you won't maybe be awake 4 hours before your races currently, but try with a little bit of the food. You can always increase the volumes later, but try with a little bit. So if you're going to eat oats, eat 2 or 3 spoons of oats, see how you feel, see how it releases, and see what the gut feels like. So that is important in terms of starting to eat before your races and starting to eat before your runs. That's quite important. The next step in your calculation of your fueling needs is then we move more towards inside the races. So usually here, when we talk about how much people need, the gender or the weight of somebody doesn't matter. So most of our guts are the same length, and absorb the same amount. So we can be a little bit more generalized here, but it depends mainly on the duration of your activity. So for marathon and ultra marathon runners, we try to achieve an intake of 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Guys, this is a huge, huge, huge amount. But then it also depends on your goal. So there's some of us that wants to run this race to compete. Doesn't matter, not necessarily to win, but to compete against yourself or somebody else or previous best time in this race. So those people need to try and get to 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour, where those of us that just wants to complete this thing will be there for a little bit longer period in time, and they will need to see if they can get to 30 to 60 grams per hour. I will get to examples just now. Just remember your number, all right? So those of us completing or those that's very inexperienced of taking carbohydrate on the road or during your runs, you try to stick to a 30 gram per hour, and then you move up to 60. And once you manage 60, you can do 1 or 2 90s and see how you feel and get your sweet spot there. But I think for all of us, the first goal is 30 and then moving to 60 grams an hour. So this will give you an indication. Here you will see the longer I'm on the road, the more I will use carbohydrates. So right at the bottom, you will see 60 minutes, 75 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. Also taking in consideration that maybe the run that I run today is an hour and a half, but I'm training for something that's definitely longer than 3 hours. And therefore, I need to maybe, even if I don't need it for this race, I need to practice it to see how I'm going to do in something that's ultra. So it is important, not necessarily every single run of yours, but at least 1 to 2 runs to aggressively feel as if you would run the ultra. Usually, we will then get to 30 gram per hour. The carbohydrate type, I will go into a little bit more detail just now, but we talk about the higher we go in carbohydrate, the more we need to use what we call multiple transportable carbohydrates, which I will explain in a minute. Should I then take gels or drinks or bars or chews? Doesn't really matter. Just be practical. So take or focus on something that you will have available. That's the one thing. Remember, you're going to be out there for a very long time. So if you're going to fuel your whole race with bananas, 1 banana is about 20 grams of carbs. So you're going to have to eat 1.5 banana per hour. And you're going to say be out there for 11 hours. That's going to be a lot of bananas that you have to carry. So be practical in your choices. The composition does matter. So what else is in there? So if I eat something with excessive amounts of fat or excessive amounts of protein, that will also take space in your stomach. And the type of carbohydrate or the type of sugar in there needs to be something that you trained with. So it's important that you practice with what you will use on race day. So when should I take these carbs? If you, in your training runs, as well as then, remember we're preparing for the race. So we're preparing for something big. So start eating and drinking early in most of your races that you do currently. It is important because there will be a time in any kind of race, but especially in the ultras, that you will not be able to eat and drink much more. And therefore, if we did a very good front part of the race, we usually better in the back part if we don't need to eat all that, or if we can't get all the carbohydrate in anymore. So then we know you still got your glycogen tank. Remember, if you're going to eat on the road, you're basically sparing your tank, your petrol tank. You can kick into it a little bit later when you're not that keen to eat anymore. Be consistent with intake. So it's really much, much better to eat small amounts over, 2 or 3 bites of carbohydrate or 2 or 3 opportunities for intake per hour, rather than what you skip 2 or 3 hours and then have to do a little bit of a catch up with this. So be consistent in your intake and either time it. So every half an hour I take something, or every kilometer, or 3 kilometers, or 5 kilometers. So whatever is suitable for you in terms of the volume you can handle. Be flexible. So some days we will be really good with this and other days not. Spoke to somebody just this week. They did a race with extreme heat, and it was really not that easy to get to the amount of fuel that he needed because he just wanted the fluid. So he just wanted the water without the sugar as such. So be flexible in terms of the plan, but this is something that you need to train every day. So this is the overview of carbohydrates. Also, remember now we spoke about 30 gram or 60 gram or 90 gram an hour, and this is the amount of food that will get you to the 30 gram per hour. So this is our first port of call. So this is the first goal that we need to get to. So sports drink, on average, 400 to 500 mils of it will give you 30 grams an hour or 30 grams of carbs. So usually if you're going to do all of your intake of carbohydrate just through the drinks, there is a little bit of a scare that you maybe will run into an overhydration. So I always advise people to have a drink plus something to eat rather than have everything as drinks. While some people can train just with drinks and you can make your body used to it. So don't exclude that opportunity, but that will be then that you have to drink 400 to 500 mils to get to your carbohydrate need. If you're going to eat bananas, 1 to 1.5 banana will give you 30 grams. Remember, per hour. So think if you can eat 1 to 1.5 bananas per hour. If that not, you can then obviously combine. Have 250 mils of sports drink and maybe half a banana per hour. So then say if you eat on half an hour, so I drink 250 mils after half an hour and eat a banana then on the hour. Gels, 1 to 1.5 gels. So gel carbohydrate content of a gel is about equal to that of a banana. You need to train with gels, and you need to make sure this is where composition matters, because a lot of the gel has got other things in it. We get gels with caffeine in it. We get gels with guarana in it. There's some that's got a fat source in it. So you need to really make sure which ones is suitable for you. You can use chews. This is all these jelly sweets and those kind of things. So 6 of those chews usually will give you 30 grams of carbohydrate. Jelly beans, about 15 jelly beans. So that is quite a lot to get through, to get to 30 grams. I don't think anybody is going to count them. And I think later on in that race, you're not going to count anything except maybe for kilometers, but not jelly beans. And then an energy bar is about 1 to 1.5 bar, the same as a gel. So just think of how compact this is. But this is just a few examples how you can get to it. A lot of people will also use raisins or dates or fruit cake of some of other sort. So all of these potatoes, oranges, those kind of things can all contribute to your intake. Okay, step 3, now you know your carbohydrates. You know you need to get 30 grams. You did make it clear that I'm going to eat every half an hour, or I'm going to have smaller amounts at 20 minutes, or at every water table. Remember, the water tables in Comrades is about 2.5 to 3.5 kilometers, every 2.5 to 3.5 kilometers. So that's quite often. So sometimes you will probably skip some of the water tables. In terms of your fluids then, step 3, is dehydration can cause a decrease in performance, as you can see in the illustration indicated here. And especially once we get to a 3% dehydration, that's where things can go really wrong. your fluid intake must try and minimize dehydration, but it's really not sensible to think that your fluid intake will be enough to match your sweat rate exactly. So a little bit of weight loss is inevitable, I think. So we really try not to aggressively drink to not lose any weight. Usually the sweat rate we measure it against the weight loss. Also, don't confuse fluid and fuel with each other. So if the day is extremely hot, which we hope we will not get, as it will be winter, then you will probably be concentrating a lot more on the fluid and not that much on the fuel. Where if it's not a hot race, especially if it's very cold, where we don't drink that much, we still have to get to our fuel needs. So that's why it's important to understand that although we combine the two, it's not the same thing. If I say figure out your sweat rate, there are ways in which we can do it. So this is basically your measure, and this you need to do maybe on a log sheet for some of your runs that you're currently doing, keeping in mind the weather will be totally different in terms of when you run Comrades from where it is now, but it's still worthwhile to do these logs to just get an indication of how much you sweat. So you take your weight loss, so the weight before minus the weight after your run. You take the volume that you've consumed in fluids. So say I've lost 2 Ks, that will be 2 liters. The volume consumed, say, will be about 1 liter. So you deduct the volume consumed from the weight loss. And then if you had any urine loss, any pit stops, you need to add that. And that then all you divide through the duration of the exercise plan, the duration of your exercise in hours, and then you will get how many liters your sweat rate is per hour. As I said, it will differ from day to day because of weather, humidity. It will also differ from day to day, maybe because of your hydration level. But it will give you an indication if you're somebody that should drink 1 liter an hour or somebody that can get away with 300 mils per hour. And this is why it's so difficult to give somebody an indication of how much they need to drink, is we don't know everybody's individual sweat rate. So if you're not going to go through all this trouble, the general or the blanket advice would be drink according to thirst, but be very, very sure that you give attention to when you're thirsty and get to fluid. Because a lot of the times we will be a little bit thirsty, but we will ignore that. Or you get that your stomach doesn't feel that great, so therefore I stop drinking the fluid. All right, so that's why if you calculate your sweat rate, I think it really can contribute quite a bit to your awareness of where you should be in this. Some thoughts on electrolytes. Electrolytes currently are generally a little bit overhyped in a sense that your body does have quite a bit of electrolytes. You can lose quite a bit and the body have enough storage of it. The one thing, so dehydration is often a bigger issue than what a salt loss would be as such. But the one thing that we know is if the fluid that you take contains electrolytes, especially salt, you retain much better of the fluid. It's not just the rush of the fluid through the system. So most of the sports products are formulated with a little bit of sodium in there. So it's often not a necessity that we have additional salt tablets and all those kind of things, but make sure that, yes, if you drink a sports drink, that it is one containing a little bit of sodium. So we don't have extreme lot of evidence, especially in ultra endurance, but it seems that if I replace sodium, it's not necessarily going to increase your performance, in a direct way, but indirectly it will make you thirsty. And if you're thirsty, you will drink more water and the dehydration would be better, and that can benefit your race in terms of the decrease then in the fatigue factor. I've got just a quick slide here that will give you an indication. So in this slide, it lists you the micronutrients. I want us to especially pay attention to sodium right at the bottom. It gives you the total amount of sodium in the body. So you will see sodium is 65 grams. It will give you the amount of sodium in the blood. It's about 3 to 3.5 grams in any given time. And in the sweat, the sodium that you lose is about 0.5 gram. So therefore, you can see there's lots of sodium that the body can replenish sodium with. So electrolyte concentrations are really always lower in the sweat than what it is in the body. And this is necessary because this is supposed to make us thirsty. So this means that there's more water loss than what there is salt loss, and therefore you don't have to rely on excessive electrolyte intake, and a normal sports drink with electrolytes should be okay if you're not going to over drink on that sports drink. Okay, step 4 would then be you do step 1, 2, and 3, and then you write down your race protocol. So now you need to know the right product. So the right product is the right one for you. So don't listen to other people. If you experimented with whatever you need to do, do that. So the right products, what you need for your fuel and your fluid, and also your preferences. A lot of people don't like excessively sweet things, so a potato with salt will suit them better, where other people don't want the solidness of stuff, therefore gel will suit them better. So make a plan, write it down, what is practical for you and what you can tolerate. Like the example I gave you in that illustration, that you literally write it down, and this is what you try and test every single time that you're out there, so that you know. So try and test it through all your long runs, but also try and test it through maybe 1 or 2 of your intensity runs. So at least twice in a week, test your fueling strategy by drinking and eating as if you're going to run the ultra as such. And then practice, practice, practice. So remember, the gut is highly adaptable. It's like a muscle. So as you train your muscle, you need to train your gut. If you train it well, with other words, if you start 8 to 12 weeks before and you do some of your runs with these fuels and fluids, you will improve gastric emptying. This is a huge one because somewhere in the race you usually feel that everything is accumulating in your stomach and you can't get it out. Improve intestinal absorption, improve your stomach comfort, and you reduce the GI symptoms. So use the products 1 to 2 a week. Practice at high intensity to replace the race day feels, and avoid something new on race day. Avoid expo temptation on race day. So don't take something new that's there at the expo. Increase your intake weekly, as I said. So try to get to 30, then to 50, then to 60, and then move towards your race day target. And then my last slide is about recovery. So recovery after the race, I'm not that worried. I hope for all of you that you can get to enough fuel and fluid soon after the race. But this is much more for your running now as you do it. So remember, you will get used to a 10K run or a 20K run, and you would feel, I've done nothing. I don't need this. Please use the recovery after every single training that you've done. Get into the habit of doing it. And we usually concentrate on refuel, rehydrate, and rebuild. So in those particular order of importance. So the refuel is get to a carbohydrate source within 30 minutes after your run if you can. This can be fruit, it can be cereal, it can be toast, it can be an energy bar, it can be the rest of your energy drink that you didn't finish. So any kind of carbohydrate source would be good here. Rehydrate, make sure that you start taking in liquids soon after the end of your race or your training. And the last one is rebuild. That is where we basically add the protein to that. So that can be milk, which is usually a very good thing to rebuild with, or it can be an egg on toast or cheese or peanut butter on a toast. So that will then rebuild the damage of the muscle. All right. Thanks, you guys. Good luck for everybody out there. Hope to see you soon, and really just work on it day by day by day so that it can turn into a habit. Thank you for the time.
Thanks so much, Nikki. That was great. And I think for me, the real take-home message there is that just like running and training for Comrades, you need to work on the nutrition. So get your nutrition plan in place now and work towards it. So yeah, thanks very much. Next up is strength training, another key component to prepping for Comrades on in June, 11th of June. So Shona Hendricks up next. She was the former head of sports science at the University of Pretoria. She has a postgraduate degree in sports science. She has an MBA, a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the NCSA in the USA. She is also the creator of the Running Through Menopause training framework. She herself is a runner and triathlete. She has run New York, Berlin, Amsterdam, and Chicago. She's run 4 times 2 oceans. And if I would let her, she would run Comrades. So that's coming soon. But we need her to help us with seconding on the side of the road. For now, she's done 7 half Ironman distance triathlon. So welcome, Shona. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Linz. Yeah, good to be here. And excuse me, I'm struggling with a bit of a cough. So if I land up having a coughing fit, I'm just going to take a sip of water. But yeah, I always feel a little bit nervous about my talk because it's always the one that no one wants to hear, right? You guys have started running, or you've been running for a while, and you've now decided, okay, I'm going to tackle Comrades, and now I'm here. I'm telling you, Nikki's telling you about eating. We all enjoy eating, but now I'm telling you about you're going to have to add some strength training into your plan, and it's really because of this. And I love this little meme because this is exactly it. Because if we don't do any kind of strength training or mobility or movement, we'll end up looking like the Tin Man. And we're runners. We want to be running. We don't necessarily want to only be doing strength training. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit why strength training is so important, and how we can put it, or how you should be putting it into your training plan so that you're getting the best out of it so that you're able to tackle Comrades on the day. So why strength training? There's 3 main reasons, and I'm going to go into each of these in quite a bit of detail. So the first one's injury prevention. That's absolutely key. Eccentric loading sounds like a big fancy word. I'll dive into what that is in a little bit. And then third reason for strength training is that it improves your performance. All right. So injury prevention, right? So running is a cyclic action, right? Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. It's just a cyclic action, but it's a constant load on the same muscles and joints all the time. And so we really have to ensure that the muscles and the musculoskeletal structures around those joints are strong enough to sustain us from the load of running, right? So because it's a cyclic kind of action. As you're going through your Comrades plan, and I'm sure you already have felt as well, is that you're increasing this volume over time. And as we increase that, we have to ensure that our body has the ability to be able to sustain it or help us maintain that load as we continue to increase it. Lindsay mentioned it earlier, but success comes from consistency. And so if you're picking up an injury, it doesn't need to be something severe. It can be a niggle, a niggling pain that takes you out of a couple of sessions. We don't want that. We want you to try and be as consistent over this entire build up to race day to ensure that you get the best performance that you can. And in order to do that, you need to not have days where you're off from training. And one of the ways of doing that is to ensure that you're doing your strength training to help that we prevent any of these niggling pains and that sore knee that then becomes a chronic issue. And so you want to make sure that you're ticking every single block off, right? So you're turning every single block green. That doesn't mean that every day there needs to be something. One of those blocks could be a rest session, which is really important as well. But we want to make sure that we have green all the way across, as opposed to a week of nothing and then a week of a lot of training and a week of nothing. So that's really, really key when it comes to your performance or your success as a runner, is injury prevention. The third aspect of injury prevention has really got to do with biomechanics, okay? And the biomechanics of running, or the biomechanics of your body, is essentially that if there's an aspect of your one part of your body that's maybe a little bit weaker, that's going to affect the way you run. That's going to affect your biomechanics of how you run. And because the body's a chain, and I'll mention this again later, the body's a chain. If something's going wrong at one side, it's going to affect something else. Other aspects of biomechanics that I always want to mention is that if we're not strong enough in certain areas, like within our hips, so let's take our hips as an example, and our glutes are at the back here, and if that's not strong enough, what happens is a little bit of internal rotation of the hips. What happens is then your knees internally rotate a little bit, and then you very often land up with knee pain or ankle pain or so on. And as female runners, that's definitely something you need to take into account, because we have wider hips. Not saying that the guys mustn't worry about this, but because females also have wider hips, there's a lot more of that internal rotation that can take place. And so all of these aspects of the way we run, the way we move, we need to take into account. And so that's why it's really, really important from an injury prevention point of view to be complementing your running with strength training. The second aspect here is better eccentric loading. Okay, so let me just explain what that means. Okay, so we're talking about the way our muscles contract. When we run, muscles contract in 2 main ways. The first way is concentric, which means your muscle fibers are pulling together as your muscle is contracting. Okay. So don't laugh at my small bicep, but imagine I'm holding a weight over here. As I contract there, the muscle fibers are pulling together, right? They're coming together and the muscle is contracting. If I'm holding this weight over here and I extend it, that is an eccentric contraction. The muscle fibers are pulling apart and the muscle's still contracting. Okay, let me put this into running terms for you. Every time you push off the ground, okay, your muscles will contract concentrically, in particular your quads, concentrically. Okay, so it's a nice strong contraction. Look at how many muscle fibers would be tied together. Every time you land on the ground, there's that shock absorbing factor and the muscle fibers are pulling apart. And you can see less fibers together, a lot less of a strong contraction. That's very poor English, but less strong contraction. Okay, so concentric, nice and strong. Eccentric, a little bit of a weaker contraction, but that's every time you're hitting the ground, every time you have that shock absorption. Sorry, I think I'm back. Sorry, can Dev just give me a... Cool. Dev, sorry, I think I'm back there. Sorry, I think you guys lost me for a second, but I think good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
every time you hit the ground, that's where you left off.
Thanks, Linz. Thank you. So every time you hit the ground, okay, that's the eccentric contraction. So why this is important in a race like Comrades, and Lindsay's going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but you know the general or the gist of it, right? It's the down run. And so every time we're running down, every time you land on the ground, your body is going to be, or your muscles are going to be contracting eccentrically. And so we really want to ensure that we're using strength training to help us get stronger in those eccentric contractions, so that you don't fatigue as quickly. All right. When you hit Fields Hill at that point in your race, you want to be able to be strong enough to maintain those eccentric contractions or that eccentric loading as you come in towards the end of your race. Okay, so that is really, really important. The third aspect of this is that you can improve your running performance. Okay, and this is there's a picture of a fuel tank there, or gas or petrol, and I know worldwide and definitely in South Africa, fuel is quite expensive, right? And so think about your running economy the same way we do the fuel economy of your car. Okay, so we want to get as far and as fast as we can with as least or as cheap, necessarily as cheap a fuel as possible, right? So Nikki's gone into a whole discussion around how we need to fuel our body. And so by doing strength training, what you're doing is you are improving your running economy. When we look at the elite athletes, yes, VO2 max is really important. And there's a high correlation between high VO2 max and really good performers in running. But it actually comes down to people, elite athletes with high or really, really good running economy that is definitive between the two. And so strength training is one of the aspects that you can do that's really going to improve your running without running. Okay, and it's almost just one of those things that we want to improve our running performance by not necessarily just running all the time, because running is so hard and so hard on the boat. So we want to make sure that by doing strength training, we're improving this running economy. There's some studies that show that you can improve your running economy by 4 to 6% by doing strength training. Imagine doing that in your car. Imagine improving your running economy, Imagine improving your fuel economy in your car by 4%. Oh my gosh, we'll be saving so much money. Equivalently, think about that in the same way with your running. Okay, so that is almost like a freebie, and that's one of the last little points as to why I think it's so important to improve your running performance. I mentioned earlier, the body is a chain. Okay, so there's a long little sentence there that says, if you've got a stronger core, you'll be able to transfer forces a lot better. It's just a very fancy way of saying that if you have a stronger core, there's less of this kind of, shifting side to side. You become a lot more efficient, right? So we're coming back onto that running economy thing. We become much more of an efficient sort of car or engine. And so that's a really, really great way to think about it. And again, with this body being a chain, if there's something going wrong in the hips, that might refer down to the knee, and you might land up with knee pain, or if there's something wrong in your feet and your feet aren't necessarily strong enough, that might refer upwards into the lower limb. And again, around things like posture and so on. If we're not strong over here and we're in this constant sort of depressed kind of posture, that affects our running economy as well, and we're not as efficient as we'd like to be. Okay. The third aspect here is that by doing strength training, you increase your resistance to fatigue. All right. So what that means is that you push that boundary of how long it takes you to fatigue a lot further along the line. There was a study done on 10,000 meter track runners. One of the groups did strength training. One of the groups didn't do strength training. And the group that did do strength training only started to fatigue in that race much later. And so that is really, really key as well, is that you're pushing your resistance to fatigue a lot later in your race. Yes, it's an ultra marathon. You are going to get fatigue. I'm not saying that by doing strength training, you're going to make it to the 90Ks and feel like you've just been on a walk, but we want to push that as far along in that race as much as we can. And strength training is definitely one of the aspects that helps with that. This is quite key, and Lindsay will dive into this, right? Heels, and more heels on the down run. You guys are you like Shona, we entered the down run, not the up run. But guys, the first 55 Ks of this race is climbing, right? So yes, there's ups and there's downs, but a lot of it is climbing. And so we want to make sure that we're strong enough to get up those hills, that by the time we hit Fields Hill and coming down, we haven't sort of ripped our muscles to shreds and absolutely depleted all of it and are broken, so that by the time we get down there, we're able to get to the end of the race without feeling absolutely shattered. Okay, so that is also one of the aspects that we need to really be aware of. Yes, it's the down run, but there is still a lot of climbing that happens up before you actually hit the actual down. Okay, so that's the why of strength training. I know I've gone through that quite quickly. Just remember injury prevention, improving your performance. Then I even forgot my third one now as well. But okay, so that's the why of your strength training. What is strength training? What kind of strength training are we talking about? I had a picture of yoga in the beginning. People ask me about Pilates. People often confuse cross training with strength training. It's a form of cross training, but I like you to think of it as two different aspects. Okay, what I'm talking about here in particular is resistance training. Okay, that doesn't mean to say that it has to be weights. Okay, it means pushing your body against some form of a resistance. That could be body weight training. You are doing a basic body push-up. That is you pushing your body against a form of resistance, and that is why this is so important. Things like cycling and rowing, those are forms of cross training, and they're excellent, but they're not going to give you the strength that you need in order to put you through the demands of this race specifically. We want this type of training to be running specific. So you want the exercises to focus on the specific focus areas that we use in running, right? So that your quadriceps, your hamstrings, glutes, the lower leg, so calves, shins. We do want to focus obviously on the core. When I say core, people often think abdominals. The core is essentially, if this is your spine, the core is all of the muscles that surround that spine. So your whole trunk, okay? We want to make that nice and strong. We want to focus on the glutes. And one of the aspects that runners are always forgetting, and there's a ton of really good research on this at the moment, is what I call foot core. So working on the small little muscles in your feet, because we're runners, right? We're on our feet, we walk all day, and we're on our feet. And if you're not working on those smaller muscles, the bigger ones just take over. Those ones get lazy. And as I mentioned, the body's a chain, and if something's wrong somewhere else, it might refer further up the chain. Okay, so there are specific areas that we want to focus on, and just make sure that they're running specific and helping you prevent injuries for running. This is really, really important. Okay, progression is important. I think that's a common theme through this. As you do with your running, as Nikki mentioned, you want to slowly progress those things up and build it up slowly. I'm not saying to you that you need to join a gym and jump into the gym and start deadlifting 100 kilograms. Please don't do that, okay? We want to start with where you are at. So if you've never done any strength training, start with body weight sort of stuff. Focus on the stabilizers. Focus on basic exercises like step-ups and squats. You don't need weights necessarily. But as we progress and get stronger, we can start adding in some resistance. You can start adding in some weights, light weights. You can start adding in some bands. Any kind of form of resistance is great, but we want to progress to where you are currently. And the key thing is you want your strength training to complement your running, right? As I mentioned, we're runners. We don't want to just becoming big sort of bodybuilders or anything else. We want to be runners, and we want our strength training to complement our running. So how often, right? Ideally, we're looking at 2 sessions a week. Again, we want this to complement your running. I don't want it to take over your running necessarily. So we're looking at ideal of 2 sessions a week. We have a saying here at Coach Perry generally that is two is better than 1 and 1 is better than none. Okay, I would far prefer that you stick to 1 session consistently all the way up towards race day, as opposed to going 2 sessions, then nothing for 2 weeks, then 1 session, then nothing for 2 weeks. Rather do the 1 if you can't stick to 2. Generally, if you are 45 to 50 years or older, I would like to see that it being more 2 to 3 sessions per week. Okay, so because there's a loss of lean muscle mass as we get older, we do want to look at that specifically as we're getting a little bit older. But yes, 2 sessions per week would be the ideal. 1 is better than none. And those sessions are around 45 minutes maximum. In our Coach Perry sessions, what we do is we run a warm-up, a mobility, and strength within a 45-minute session, and you can really get a lot done in those 45 minutes that complements your running very nicely. When to stop strength training? Hopefully never. Okay, so as a general rule for life, I really would like to see that this is something that you keep through your life, but we're talking specifically within your training here. So you want to reduce your strength training within your recovery weeks. So if you're working on a 4-week cycle for your running, so you week 1, then week 2, we're building up the running a little bit. Week 3, we build it up a little bit more. Week 4, we tend to bring the volume down. In those lower volume running weeks, I also want you to reduce your strength. So if you're doing 2 strength sessions a week, in that recovery week, you drop it to 1. If you're only doing 1 strength session, you can take that strength session out and maybe just do some light mobility. The same goes for reducing the load in your big training weeks. So as you're coming up to your qualifier, as you're coming up to your big runs, the big training runs, your Comrades run, your long run, you definitely want to reduce the strength training in those weeks as well. Okay. And then before race day, you want to stop doing strength training altogether at least 10 days before race day. I'm happy with 10 to 14 days. If you are very much a beginner with strength training, I would say up to 14 days. And then you can also just maintain within those days by doing some light mobility or some foot core, but definitely stopping the hard sort of strength at least 10 days before Comrades. And that would probably go for a qualifier as well. For those of you who haven't qualified yet, I would say at least 7 to 10 days before your qualifier, you can stop that. But for Comrades race day, you're looking at 10 days before the time. All right, and then some other considerations. This is my last point, is the technique. Okay, you can go anywhere. You can Google strengths for running, and you will get all the exercises that you probably need. It has got so much to do with about how you do the exercises and less about what exercises to do. A lot of people always say to me, Shona, what exercises should I be doing for Comrades, or what strength training should I be doing? Yes, those exercises are important, but if you don't do them properly, you're not going to be A, getting the benefits from them that you need, and B, you might also be putting yourself at a risk of injury. So really, really focus on the technique of how you do these exercises. That is absolutely important. And then, as I mentioned again, those progressions for where you are. So build yourself up slowly. Don't just dive into crazy sort of strength sessions. Again, we want these strength sessions to complement your running. Okay, so if that's the one way I can get runners to start adding strength into their plans, is that to let you know that I'm not trying to take you off the road or off the trails. I'm trying to keep you on the road. And the way we're doing that is by just adding some strength training in and trying to complement it for where you are currently. Okay. Last point for me there before I hand back to Lindsay and the team. We have a French, it's not a French strength plan, it's a free strength training plan, right? So just scan that QR code. I promise you it's in English. I'm sure we could get it translated into French if you need to. It's a very basic, simple plan to get you started. And sorry, that's maybe one thing I didn't mention is that you don't have to do the strength training in a gym. And you'll see with this strength plan, it's very basic. You can do it at home. You can put Netflix on and do the same strength training at the same time, and get it done, when you can. All right. So yeah, that is my bundle. I'm sure there'll be a couple of questions, Linz, and we can tackle those in the Q&A afterwards.
Cool. Yeah, and I will pop up the let's call it barcode. I'll pop that up for you to scan again later in the talk, because we haven't left you much time to do that now. So I'll pop that on during the Q&A. Right, so this is what we're training for. It is the down run. And this map doesn't truly do it justice, but it does allow us to pull in some key points. And for tonight, that's really what I want to do, is draw your attention to some key points and why, when we talk about the Comrades, there is a lot of up running to begin with, and then some severe downhill in the second half of the race. So the highest point of the race comes just after 25 kilometers. So for the first 25 Ks of the race, you really will be forgiven for thinking that we conned you into coming and running the down run, when in fact this was an up run all along. So just prepare yourself mentally for tons of climbing in the first 25 Ks. And then it is mostly downhill to Drummond, to halfway, but there are some lumps along the way to be aware of. And then this map absolutely does no justice to the climb from Drummond to the top of Bothers Hill. It is really, really significant, really, really tough. It's really, really long. And the point is that when you get to the top of Bothers Hill, you've got just over a marathon left. And most of that marathon is downhill. Okay, there are some climbs there still, but most of those kilometers are downhill on tired legs. And although that sounds like paradise, the problem is that often people go way too fast in those first 56 or so Ks, and then it really makes those last 36, 37 Ks very, very hard. And that eccentric pounding, particularly on Fields Hill. So there's almost 10 Ks of ending downhill. And that's really where the strength training is absolutely so key, and why we've had a talk on strength training this evening. Right. So we all know the big five. Okay, the big five generally made famous by the up run. So I know there were some people giving Comrades a hard time on socials about Polly Short's not being one of the big five on the down run, but it is one of the big five, and it comes very early, and we run up the short side on the down run, but it is one of the big five. So your big five are Polly Shorts and Chunga, Bothers Hill. I put Fields Hill in bracket because it's officially one of the big five, but on the down run, I call it Cowies and 45th cutting. Technically, 45th cutting is not one of the big five, but it's how I work it on the up run. And in Chunga and Fields Hill, of course, are downhills, but they both do enormous damage to your legs on the down run. But as Shona mentioned, the problem is for people who haven't done Comrades before, they're always mentally prepared for these big five tough climbs that they've got to do. But we don't prepare ourselves mentally for all the little climbs in between. Probably the hardest of those climbs that nobody tells you about is once you have gone over Little Polly's on the down run, you climb from the bottom of there all the way until you go under the highway. And it's a really long climb of about just over 3 kilometers. So those are really the important things to remember. Umlaas Road is the highest point, so 25 Ks, that's where you're going to do that last little climb and get to the highest point. Then you hit the Harrison not so flat. They're lumpy, but they're not too bad. But again, just don't expect any flat running at Comrades. When you get into Hillcrest, what's so tough there is that now you've run down Bothers Hill and you've got people shouting, it's downhill from here, it's downhill from here, and you hit Hillcrest. There's a 400-meter climb there, which is, to be honest, a normal day of the week, it's not so bad. But after running over 50 kilometers, it is tough. And then after you've gone down Cowies Hill, the running is really, really good, except for a little bump you've got to go over with about 14 Ks to go. And then you do 45th cutting, and you think to yourself, wow, that's it. I've finally done all the climbing. But as soon as you get over 45th, down the other side, you've got to go up a very short, steep little climb to get onto the highway. That's the Mayville off-ramp for you. You'll be using it as an on-ramp. And then finally, Tollgate Bridge with about 5 Ks to go is the last time you'll climb. So just prepare yourself mentally. There's lots of climbing, lots of downs, and not much flat on the Comrades down run. Okay, it's a unique challenge. because there's early climbing, which soften you up, make you tired, zap your energy, and then this long downhill with eccentric load that you've got to prepare yourself for. 2 weeks before Comrades, we will really go in depth, and not quite kilometer by kilometer, but I'll really go in depth. And I urge you to listen to that, so that for those last 2 weeks, you can do your final preparation, visualization, and really dial in your race plan. And the eccentric load in the second half is huge. So you have to do strength training. And I want to tell you that from a training point of view, you want to do enough. You don't want to do too much, because if you arrive tired or injured on Comrades race day, you are going to be in real trouble in those last 25 kilometers. Okay. I said it earlier. I was going to share a really critical stat with you, and here it is. Okay. In 2016, we had the highest dropout in years. So we sent out a survey to the over 4,000 athletes who didn't finish Comrades. Over 1,000 of those responded back to us. Now, that is incredibly powerful stats. It tells us what we need to know. 641 respondents that did not finish Comrades started Comrades with an injury. Okay. They started Comrades with an injury. So if you start Comrades with an injury, you are massively increasing your risk of not finishing Comrades. You're increasing your risk essentially by 60% of not finishing Comrades. Okay. So you want to do the right amount of training, being slightly underdone, and doing strength training is going to be far better than doing too much and breaking down with injury. So let's get into what we want to do for these next 12 weeks, okay? We need to be training consistently. I emphasized that right at the beginning of the talk. Really, really important, okay? Right now, we don't want to be going crazy, okay? We want to start, sorry, I made a typo there. We really start the training in March. So we're preparing for June. So the Comrades training truly starts in March, which is literally 10 days away. So we are on the doorstep. Up until now, we've been building up, okay? You want to try and qualify as early as you can, okay? That's a given. But the most important part about qualifying is you need to qualify when you're ready. You've got until the first week of May to qualify. And the most important thing to note about that is that the later you qualify, the easier you want to do that marathon. Okay, I realize that I'm talking to a lot of people tonight that running a 450 marathon takes everything. And so if you do fall in that kind of 2,000 to 3,000 runners that are going to be finishing Comrades in the last half an hour, then of course, whenever you qualify, it's going to be tough. And the important thing is that you must then make sure that you recover properly afterwards. If you start training too soon afterwards, you're going to get injured. So we try to qualify as early as we can. And the later we leave that qualifying, the easier we run. And the harder we have to run to qualify, the more important it is to recover afterwards. On goals for March, we don't want to be smashing the intensity, okay? I'm not talking to the silver medal athletes. I'm not really talking to Bill Rowan's now either. Those two medals will be bringing in some intensity. The Robert Machalis, your bronzes, your finishes, which that's 75 to 80% of the Comrades field. We're not too worried about intensity now. We're worried about being consistent. We're worried about building up slowly, systematically, and not jumping up our mileage too quickly, okay? Your long runs, probably from March, your long runs constitute the most important training session. Why? Because we need to mentally prepare for being on the road for a long period of time. So try not to miss those. But the most important aspect is consistency. So we want to keep ticking our boxes, doing our sessions. I chatted to a client today who's training for a very fast Comrade, and I was like, yeah, you don't want to look too far ahead because the mileage is getting quite high. And he said, you know what, Lindsay, when we get to high mileage weeks, I don't even think about the total. all I do is tackle it one session at a time. I make sure that if I do every session, I'm going to get to the number that I need to get to at the end of the week. And that's really what consistency is about. Tick the sessions. If you keep ticking the sessions, they build one on top of each other. It makes everything manageable. Okay. You can and you should be walking on your long training runs, because you can and should be walking on race day. So that's very important. You don't have to be stubborn and get through these training sessions with no walking. You absolutely are allowed to walk when you do your Comrades training. Right, your target distances for March. For finishers, I know that number looks low. There's people that are looking at that and going, forget it, that's not enough training. I promise you, for finishers, 50 Ks a week is enough. You're going to do a couple of weeks anyway that are bigger than that, because you're going to do these long runs. You're going to do your first marathon, you can do your first ultra. So there are going to be some weeks that are quite big, but your week to week, you only need to be doing 50 Ks a week. Bronze, 55 to 60. Bill Rowan's will be doing about 80 Ks a week, maybe a little bit more in March. And silver medal, see, I told you earlier, you run a 7-11, you don't have any friends, probably don't like your family. 100 Ks a week, that takes a lot of time and commitment. So Robert Machali, I really shouldn't forget about him. It's a cool new medal. But Robert Machali, you're probably looking at about 65 to 70 kilometers a week. And for Isabel Roche Kelly, that's very similar to silver medal. Right, moving into April. April is going to be your biggest month of training. Okay, so for the finishers, you're going to be 50 to 60 Ks a week. Again, you're going to have these outliers. You're going to do towards the first week of May, you're going to do a long run of 50 Ks all by itself. And so that week, you're probably going to end up with a 75, almost 80 K week. But for your general week-to-week training, 50 to 60, bronze, 60 to 65, your Robert Machali, 70 to 75, Bill Rowan, 80 to 90 Ks, and your silver, depending on exactly what you're training for goal-wise, it's going to be between 100 and 160 Ks a week. Right. We have written the plans for you. So you really don't have to think too hard about this. If you jump onto those training plans, they will prepare you for Comrades. The very important thing with these training plans is to remember that you must train for what you are capable of. If you try and jump up medals to try and be sure of your medal, you're going to risk injury. These programs are written to get you to the finishing time that you're looking for and to try and get you there injury-free. That's really the target. So if you're running around about 450 to 224 marathon, it's the finisher plan. If you're a 425 for a marathon and a 210 for a half, it's bronze. If you can run a 4-hour marathon or a sub 2-hour half, it's Robert Machali. If you can run a sub 335 marathon or a 145 half, it's Bill Rowan. And if you can run a sub 3-hour or a sub for a marathon or a sub 126 and a half, you're looking at Isabel Roche Kelly / silver medal. And then I just put the Wally Hayward up there so you can see that those medals require unique human beings. So sub Wally Hayward, sub 230 marathon, and a 72-minute half marathon. So those plans are on the Comrades website. Those plans are on the Coach Perry website. You don't have to do any thinking. You can follow those plans and they will get you to the finish line. Okay. Make sure that you are in the right shoes for you. That is a critical area for avoiding injury. And make sure that they are new enough at the start of March that they're going to get you through at least March and April. And I would always look at getting a new pair of shoes early in May so that you can run those in and have them with about 150 to 200 kilometers for Comrades race day. That's about how many Ks you want in your Comrades shoe, unless of course you're going to be in a super shoe. Then you want less. Then you want 50 to 100 Ks if you're going to be wearing one of the carbon fiber shoes, but you don't want to be buying new shoes at the end of May and trying to get them in. And then in the Q&A, we'll just maybe talk a little bit about some equipment for strength training that you can then do at home. Right. Next up, the treat for the evening. We've got Adele Brudrak. She was the third lady across the line, first South African. She also had a storming run at Omni Dam that I don't want to talk too much about because I saw something about that in the presentation, so I want to leave that to her. But fantastic local athlete that did her first Comrades last year. So talking to us from Poch, Adele, really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you Dean, for the opportunity. Yeah, it's really an honor to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome. So yes, everybody, I am Adele. I completed my first Comrades Marathon last year, and similar to you guys, I also attended this exact webinar last year. So going into it really with big eyes and hoping to gain a lot of insights, which paid off. So I'm really hoping that you will also take similar knowledge with you on this road, because it's really an exciting road. So just a bit of background, why I started running. Now, my mother loves to tell the story of where it all began. So when I was in grade 1, I finished in a second position for the 60-meter sprint. So as you can see on that photo, on the top, second position on the podium, I was really not very happy, and I was actually devastated. And I wanted to be faster, and I wanted to win, as I've got a very competitive spirit within me in all aspects of life. And a local dad approached my mom and said, hey, he will be my coach. So the year after that, I dominated on the podiums, blooming with self-confidence. But yeah, it wasn't always sunshines and rainbows. I barely ever made a provisional team and to go further, but that love for running stuck within me, and I continued to that throughout my life. Well, why did I then also continue to run? So when I entered the university level, I want to say I took a gap a bit from the running, as I really wanted to focus on my studies. And it was only after my honors year that I put on my running shoes again. So I really lost a lot of fitness. And that's really when I had this hunger again for my running. But just like hopefully everyone listening, life goes on. I got married. I got into an 8-to-5 job position. I had my children, etc., etc. So for husband and I, we always saw a competition or a race as a possible little vacation or a getaway, a way of spending life together, time together, seeing some friends and family. So either going to Cape Town on the right-hand side, which was literally our first half marathon ever, the two oceans, or running our first marathon together on the left-hand side, which I did the Naisna Forest Run, literally 11 months after giving birth to my firstborn. So yeah, we really enjoyed this journey together, tackling every single race distance from 10 to 50 kilometers, our debut runs together for the first time. But he just said, no, he's not doing the Comrades. He will support me from the side, which I was forever grateful for. So yeah. Now you might ask, okay, but then why Comrades? Well, why not Comrades? I grew up in a household where we watched this beloved Comrades race from gunshot to gunshot, from start to finish, literally not moving away from the couch as we were too scared we might miss anything. So I grew up with this lifelong dream that I want to run this race one day, placing every single runner on a pedestal and thinking that they are literally like the ultimate athletes to be able to complete that distance in a single day. So I decided, okay, the year that I turned 30, that year I will run the Comrades as a happy birthday present to myself. But unfortunately, that year was when COVID hit, and I had to postpone that dream with 2 years, which in hindsight, I think was a very great thing. So I got a bit of extra mental preparation. Now, my first thought was, where do I begin? Where should I, or how should I prepare for my first Comrades? As I am a sports scientist and a lecturer, I have all this knowledge, so I barely ever had a coach to coach me. I coached myself. So in 2022, the date was proposed 28 August 2022. Having all this knowledge, I started thinking about writing my programs up until the Two Oceans Ultramarathon, but I definitely did not know what to do further than that, especially for a race like the Comrades. How do I play with variables such as the recovery? How much recovery should I do? Do I rest 1 day? Do I rest 2 days? Do I rest at all for the Comrades Marathon? Do I play with the intensity? So should I do some interval training, or should it just be some basic endurance type of running, and the volume, also known as the mileage? Do I run thousands and thousands of kilometers, or can I keep it short and simple? So all of these thoughts went through my mind, especially before I attended this specific webinar, and also took some hands with some knowledgeable people. So the only thing that I knew, or constant thing that I knew, was there's a mountain of training that's awaiting for me 12 weeks before Comrades. Whether it be volume-based, mileage-based, or time on the road, I just knew that there's a mountain that I will have to be able to climb to successfully master this dream of mine. Now, like I mentioned, as a sports scientist, I know that I have to plan. You can't just go blindly and do the same training session day in and day out. You have to start planning something. So going on Google, entering planning or plans or training plans, you will definitely pop or see that diagram pop up on your screen, where it divides training sessions for you in various phases. So I knew now, okay, so there's various phases that I have to implement in my training plan, but how do I implement it, or when do I start implementing it? So I read up on all this information because I did not just want to gain the benefits such as endurance and fitness, but also to minimize the risk for injuries or getting sick. I went into training with the mindset of rather undertrained at the race than overtrained or injured, which could result in me being part of the 650 injured athletes not even completing the race. So as I said, I knew that the training plan will consist of various phases, and also where you have a preparation period. That is the period that we all will start going into, where you do a lot of fitness or endurance-based type of activities, and later on start focusing on your competition levels, where I will give you a bit of info on that in the next slide. So I also took into consideration the route profile, knowing that there's going to be a lot of climbing. So I need to start focusing on my strength training as well for the concentric as well as my eccentric. So like Shona said, the eccentric is all the descents where you go down, where your muscle fibers are in a lengthened position. So I started training for both of those two training types, strength types, so that I can be strong throughout the race. Now, remember, please, even though I finished with a very good time, I think, that time and that position was definitely not planned from the get-go. That was near a few weeks before Comrades that I started thinking about a good position. So I wanted just to finish the race. So that is why I started implementing all these plans. So after April last year, I took hands with Coach Lindsay and said, okay, let's start working on a one-to-one basis so that I can really maximize my performance, so that he can help me and guide me, because I had the knowledge to train up to, let's say, 40 kilometers, but nothing further than that. So that he can coach and tell me, okay, but how long should your long runs be? Is there matter to the madness of running between 60 and 80 kilometer long runs? Is there science behind running 200 plus kilometers? Because that is all the information that I heard from other athletes and runners, and yeah, crazy information. So planting that little seed of doubt and overreaching, which will ultimately end in an overtrained and injured athlete. So just getting a soundboard as to what should my intensities be, what can I aim for, how to implement the principle of progression, taking into consideration my competition schedule, my workload, and also my health, because I have an 8-to-5 job, similar to you guys. I am a mother of 2 little, very busy children. So there are days that training goes well, and there were days that I barely slept. So how do I adjust my training schedule so that I can really get the best out of every single day? So for me, joining Coach Perry's team was really a soundboard so that I can get the best out of my training that I wanted to. Now, going into the competition phase, I used my races to my advantage. So as I said, you have a very large competition period that you will go into, and that can really start off a few weeks before your race to a few months before your race. And I saw this as an ideal opportunity to play around with various aspects that I needed for my Comrades race day, such as my race pace. So Coach Lindsay said, if you plan to run, walk your Comrades journey, do that in your races. So for me, I trained my races, especially my longer races, the marathons, the ultra marathons, to run them at the desired pace that I want to run Comrades with. I chose specific races that is, for instance, not a flat and fast route like the Omnidam, which is a very hilly course of approximately 700-800 meter elevation gain on that 50-kilometer race. So training at altitude on a hilly course at my specific race pace to see what are my body able to do. And then also incorporating factors such as a sleep regime. So trying really to get my optimal sleep levels in before competition. So trying to manipulate my sleep routine a few weeks before the races so that it's not a new type of routine before Comrades. Nutrition, to really see what works with my body before the races and also during the races. You don't want to enter a race such as the Comrades with substances that your body's not accustomed to, because you can get gastrointestinal discomfort. You can cramp up. Yeah, you want to go into that race well prepared, doing, for instance, a training run. So we went and we did a training run on the Comrades route with a full kit on, to do like a dress rehearsal. So running desired pace, doing your substances or your supplements throughout the race as you plan it out, and to see what works and what does not work for you. And then also a big reason why I incorporated races in my training plan was, we know the stands in South Africa. So for me, it was a chance then to do a long run in a safe environment. So I knew the roads will be blocked off. I knew there will be police control surveying us. So I really felt safe. I knew there will be water tables or fueling stations. And lastly, I also knew that there's going to be some nice company for me at these races. So what can you expect at the Comrades? Now, I think the one and the biggest thing that stands out for me is the atmosphere. You will feel the buzz upon entering Durban. We felt the buzz upon entering Joburg airport. Everyone was happy. Everyone is excited. And this is what Comrades is about. I will never forget the day before Comrades, we went for a little jog on the promenade, and there were literally thousands of runners jogging up and down, singing, all the various time stations or time buses. They got together and they did their jogs together. So this was really such a nice experience for us. And I knew that this is what Comrades is about. It's about the camaraderie between the athletes, friends, family, the spectators. Along the route, as you will see in this picture, there will literally be thousands of spectators there for you, and they will scream out their lungs out for the first runner up to the last runner, supporting everyone. And this is really so uplifting that kilometers will just go by unnoticed. You will just notice, kilometer 32, 34, 35, up to 90 has passed. And they will vary from hometown residents, schools, bands singing, cars hooting for you. So believe me, you will definitely not have a shortage on moral support or fueling stations, because everyone will try and give you something that they truly believe in will work. I got a few interesting offers along the route, but I said, no, I'm sticking to my plan and sticking to my guns. I don't want to take any chances. Now, what was the atmosphere from the front? Now, let's just say that leading the race from the start was not part of our race plan. But like I said, that atmosphere was so electric from the start that I felt so energized and I felt super strong. I think, if it was a 100-meter sprint, I would definitely have won Usain Bolt that day. And when you stand behind that starting line and Shoza Loza sung and then the national anthem and you hear the roosters screaming, you are literally fired up. I was so fired up, I almost made a false start, believe it or not, if that is possible at a Comrades race. But my one friend just held me back. She's like, no, not yet, stop. So fun times. Also knowing you are running alongside thousands and thousands of athletes, and all has the exact same goal as you, and that is to finish the ultimate human race. And that was exactly my goal as well. I wanted it to finish the race to the best of my abilities, whether that would have been to end up with a Bill Rowan, bronze, silver, gold, or the first position. I wanted to enjoy my race and I wanted to finish the race. But why, you might ask? Why enjoy it if I was in such a good position? Well, the answer is simple. You only get one chance to run your first Comrades race. From there on, you will never get a first chance again. It's the second, the third. It's a bit of the known. Nothing is the unknown anymore. So for me, I really said, no matter what, no matter the position or pain I'm going through, I'm going to enjoy it. And that was literally what happened. So even though I was in the leading position for 60 kilometers and then I was in pain and then I dropped down to the third position, I enjoyed every single second of the day. And I stayed at the stadium until the final whistle was blown and the last athlete crossed the finish line, bringing back all the memories from my childhood. So from one novice to another, nothing is impossible. And that is what I want to tell you guys, really. Nothing is impossible. If you put your heart into the race, you will definitely finish it. Thank you.
That was super cool. I've got my own goosebumps there. So yeah, just in case you think I'm making it up, very cool. And that really sums up what being a novice at Comrades is all about. Yeah, and hopefully this year you will use all that experience to go a few steps better. Yeah, so that brings us to the question part of the evening. So please, I know people have been asking questions. You can carry on asking questions. I promised half an hour at the start, and we will do at least half an hour. So yeah, get those questions in. I'm gonna flick back just to the strength so that you can scan that barcode, and then I will come back a little later on. But yeah, so anyone who wants to download that strength training plan can, and Shona will drive the Q&A session. And yeah, fire away. Let's get cracking.
Yeah, let's get cracking. Maybe while we've got Adele with us, Adele, I'm gonna ask you your first question. It is late, and I know what time elite athletes go to sleep. So you probably need to get cracking off to bed soon enough. Otherwise, your coach is going to shout at you tomorrow. Nick is asking a great question here. He says, when you're en route, do you look at staying in the middle of the road, or so there isn't as much of a camber? That is obviously going to differ for you compared to the guys at the back because you have a lot more space. But yeah, maybe just give your insights on that, and yeah, that'd be great.
Definitely try and go to run the shortest distance possible, because if you're going to run in the middle, you can ultimately run up to 4 kilometers extra over that whole 90-kilometer race. So we trained that into the race, but when I got into the race that specific day, there's photos of me running alongside the road, and then I made the click of, hey, but you're running on the wrong side of the road. You have to be on the right-hand side. You're running a longer distance. And then I made like a short right turn. So try really and shorten the distance for yourself. But if it's not possible, if there's thousands of athletes alongside you and you risk an injury or to fall or something, just stay in your lane. But ultimately, I didn't complete 90 or 89 kilometers as advertised. I completed 91 kilometers on race day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adele. If there's another question that comes up, I'll try and get it on for you quicker, then so you can go and do some good sleep. Lindsay did mention sleep. Linz, I'll bring you in this for a question here. Brad has asked, this is a great question. I know there's an article that Camille Heron, who's obviously a ex-Comrades winner, spoke about in terms of her long runs. But Brad is asking, how long should your weekly long run be? And what are your views about the traditional long run versus perhaps breaking that up into smaller, or as he said, your double run days, perhaps? Just mute, please, Lindsay. Yeah, thanks.
But look, for me, the long run also has a few parts to it that are more than just physiological. And, that is dialing in on the nutrition, and it is getting yourself mentally ready. I do think traditionally that most people do way too long training runs, and you don't need to be bashing out 40 plus kilometers a week in, week out. For the majority of the field, I feel like 3 runs of 42 Ks or longer is all you need for Comrades. So your qualifier and 2 ultras, or 2 marathons and 1 ultra. And I really don't feel like anybody needs to run more than 50 kilometers to run a solid Comrade. So that's really is for the majority of the field. Funny enough, while I was waiting for something earlier today, I was reading some comments from Steve Magnus, who's a really internationally well-known exercise physiologist, and they talk about 2 hours being optimal for mitochondrial development. So, from physiological point of view, probably 2-hour runs are enough. And if you do have time that you can split runs and split long runs up, that's a really good way of doing it, and you get very close to the same adaptation by splitting it up like that. The only thing you don't get is that little bit of mental, what it feels like to be on your feet that long, and the nutrition. And so if you do have time and you are splitting up your runs, then I would say that's absolutely fine. But just make sure that you have those 3 or 4 opportunities where you do run between 32 Ks, the old traditional 20 miler, or 42, and a 50 somewhere. So yeah, that is it. Yeah, in terms of no, that's that. I think that answers that question. Yeah.
I'm just going to follow on with that one, Linz, just while I've spotted, because you mentioned the 50K, but Ingo's asking here, is a 50K long run at the beginning of March too early? When do we want to be doing that long run?
Look, it is quite early, because it means that you are quite fit already. And so the beginning of March, we don't really want to be super fit. We want to be fit enough to really start training properly for Comrades. So in my opinion, it is a little bit early. Yes, there are going to be people that are running that far. Yes, they are training to do something special at Comrades. And I think that is part of the problem with how people prepare for Comrades, is that most of what we think we know about preparing for Comrades comes from a time when there were like less than 2,000 finishers, and more than 1,000 of them were running silver medals. So you got advice from really the most talented runners in the country. And that's not the same for everybody in the field. So I do feel like that is a little bit early, yes.
Excellent. And just while you're on, so we're not flicking around with cameras too much, and then Nikki can give her input on this question as well. So, Linz, you go first, and then Nikki, if you can maybe follow on. I think Amanda also asked a similar question, but Johan's asking, I struggle a lot with cramps from 28 to 32 kilometers. Will longer runs help? What essentially is going to help with cramping? Because I think Amanda's question was more along those lines. So, Linz, if you can go first, and then Nikki, if you can give your inputs thereafter as well.
Yeah, so look, with this specific question, doing longer runs will help, but not doing too many longer runs, because cramp essentially is from fatigue. So we do want to build up the resistance, but if we do too many, you're going to line up on race day very tight, and you're still going to cramp. So strength training is a really good way of helping get you stronger, more fatigue resistant, and it does help reduce the severity and incidence of cramp. Doing the right type of long runs at the right time, and run walk. So run walk is an excellent strategy for pushing out the time to cramping. And when the cramps start, instead of stopping dead and really letting that cramp take hold fully, then you want to walk. So as you feel the cramp coming, slow down, walk, and then you walk for a little while till you feel that ease up, and then you slowly build up your run again. The other thing you want to avoid once the cramping starts is sudden movements. You don't want to just be veering off to the side or suddenly stopping, suddenly starting, because that will then lead to cramp. But absolutely, there are some instances where nutrition plays a role in cramping, and so it's definitely worth having a look at that. But for the majority of people, it is a fatigue model. And so improving your conditioning, doing the strength training, run walking, those are 3 key things that can help improve that situation.
Great, Nikki. And from your side, because I know that question will always come from a nutrition point as well. Your inputs on cramping?
Yes, Shona, I think the main thing here is to understand it is coming from fatigue. So the only thing that you can really do nutrition-wise to try and delay fatigue is, as I said, fuel with the right fuel for what you're running with. So sometimes if you are depleted of fuel, that can also obviously bring fatigue on, and also whilst you are dehydrated. But understanding that the roots of the cramp is not necessarily in the nutrition side. It's not as if you have a deficiency or something. It's just in terms of what nutrition can do to try and delay fatigue.
Yeah, excellent. So, and then I know I'm asking the questions, but let me just mention from a strength side, Nikki, don't go away because I'm going to stick with nutrition after this. But from a strength side with cramping, as Lindsay mentioned, it's a fatigue issue, but very often it can also be an imbalance. So I know when often people are cramping in their calves, it's an imbalance within the lower limb. So making sure that you're doing some strength training as well is really, really going to help with that. Okay, Nikki, some of the nutrition questions that came up, and I know you would have touched on this in your talk, but maybe just to give an example, Nick is asking, he says, for a marathon, I take 6 gels as an example. Is it as simple as just doubling that for Comrades, or should I look at taking more?
If you can, 6 gels. If you run the marathon in 4 hours, 6 gels would have given you 30 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So I would definitely try. It's sometimes difficult to run an ultra with just gels because you really do get fatigued in terms of the taste of it, and it can become very sweet. I would try in any case to increase. So if you run a 4-hour marathon, I would try and increase the 30 gram per hour to maybe try to get to a 40-50 gram per hour by adding another type of carbohydrate, not necessarily a gel, but maybe a solid food. And train with that and see if that doesn't give you the better results. That maybe you can save a little bit of the gels and rather use them on the back end because then they become easier than the solid food to take.
Excellent. And then just with regards to hydration, and you touched on this quite a bit, and I guess this question's a bit twofold. Andrew's asking, would running with a hydration pack be beneficial for first-time runners to avoid dehydration? And I just want to follow that question on, Nikki, with another one. Sorry, now I need to find it. But it's around essentially hyponatremia, and is overhydration essentially a concern, in terms of, so how much should people drink?
I don't know that answer, but I think hydration pack can be a bit of an overkill because it is an uncomfortable thing to run with, and there is plenty water tables. So I don't think that you will run out of fluid. If you trained with the hydration pack on your back and that's what you normally use, I can't see that it would be a problem to run with that. And maybe then you can stay wide on the water tables because sometimes there is a little bit of overcrowding there. So the obvious advice would be drink according to thirst. Because there is ample water tables, that advice would help and would be sensible to do because there will be fluid available quite soon after you get thirsty. As I said, just be tentative to the sensation of thirst, and that discomfort can sometimes also make you drink a little bit too much. So overhydration is a thing. It's definitely a thing, and you can drink too much, especially if you go out with the mind of drink as much as you can. I think that can be problematic as such. That's why we prefer not only to do it on water, but also to include some drinks with electrolytes so that you can retain the fluid a little bit better. So I think the best would be, if you know your sweat rate, drink according to that. If you don't know the sweat rate, rather than go according to thirst.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki. You can flick yourself off. I will come back to some nutrition ones in a bit. And Sofiso, I hope you're still around. I think you are. I just want to ask this, and if you can answer it for me, or just let me know or not. But touching on that, is there information of what food and drink is provided at the water tables on the route? When, where, and how can people get that information?
At the moment, cannot confirm as yet. I think people just need to follow us around. I think around May, we will have that confirmed and we will share that information across our social media.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I know for most of the big races, you will sort of get that information closer to race day. So yeah, just sort of stay tuned for some of that. Okay, tons of questions coming in. Let me ask some strength questions because I guess while I'm asking questions, I may as well answer one or two. So sorry, there was one that I found here and now I've lost it. There's tons of questions coming in, so that is awesome. Thank you. This question from Nick is saying, should you do a strength session before or after a run, considering the 2 days of rest? So I love that question because it's really, it touches in. Lindsay mentioned 2 days of rest. So yes, very often you might have to have one of your days where you are doing, a run and strength training on the same day. The science is sort of out on that. A lot of the science kind of says you maybe should be doing your run first and then strength, but that's really specifically for sports like rugby or American football. for me, I'm just really, really happy if runners are getting their strength training in. I personally like to run first and then do my strength training afterwards. Another really nice way to do it as an ideal is, and this is if you have the luxury of time, is to do, one of them in the morning and one of them in the afternoon to then, sort of maximize recovery in between. But again, that can sort of vary. It's a personal preference. I often joke, and I think we mentioned this in the last webinar as well, is that Lindsay and I differ. Like I say, I like to run first and then do my strength. Lindsay, I'm trying to get him to be as consistent with strength as I'm trying to get you guys. And so very often I'll say to Linz, make sure you're getting it in. And Lindsay goes, okay, well, I'm going to treat my strength training like my vegetables, so I'm going to do my strength training first, and then I'm going to treat myself with my run, which is my dessert, afterwards. So we often call strength training like eating your Brussels sprouts. Okay, so just so you guys know. Cool. Let me keep looking for a couple of questions here. Let me see if I can bring Lindsay in again. Sorry, just reading and talking at the same time. I've been spending too much time with the guys doing two things at once. Linz, this is a great question, and I know as Coach Perry, we've put up a couple of articles about this in the meantime, but Nikki, you could probably follow on with this as well, because this is important. But how do we adjust, or how do people who practice Ramadan, how do they adjust their training plans with Ramadan, because where it falls within the training schedule at the moment? If I'm not mistaken, I think it falls over the Oceans period at the moment.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and we've got a series of articles that are coming out about that, and we probably also have a video at the time that'll go into it in quite a lot of detail, but you absolutely need to adjust your training for that. And I would say the approach becomes moderate, consistent training. Okay, so what time of day becomes, it's quite individual. And I've spoken to a couple of individuals that have experienced it to try and get a sense of which is better. And the answer is it is a little bit on the individual. So my preferred method is to come home in the evening once the sun has gone down, and to break your fast with something small, and then to run between 45 minutes and an hour, and then after you've run to then have a proper meal, hydrate, etc. There are people who like to train in the morning, but then I would encourage to do that very early so that you can get both a meal and fluids in after your run before the sun comes up. Otherwise, it makes the fast that much harder during the day. In terms of how to keep up the training, I would say 45 to 60 minutes 3 times a week, and then one longer run or a run that's split up. So it may be a shorter run in the morning on the weekend and a slightly longer run in the evening, so that you can get in like 20 to maybe 25 kilometers tops on one of your runs on the weekend. By doing that, you're going to maintain a really decent level of fitness without really depleting yourself any more than you need to. And it means then that as you fuel up in those 10 days to 14 days after Ramadan ends, then you will just feel the benefit of that training that you did. But you absolutely need to moderate your training. I'd strip out all the intensity, moderate intensity, moderate duration exercise is the theme. It's about being consistent. It's not about getting in big numbers.
Awesome, thank you. Nikki, anything from a nutrition perspective that you want to add there?
No, Sean, I think Lindsay has said it. So if we can get the run so that we can have something before and after, that would be really the ideal. Something light beforehand, which is carbohydrate based, afterwards the carbohydrate plus the protein combination, and then really thorough hydration, even maybe then looking like a rehydration drink so that we can get to sleep and to rehydrate proper.
Awesome, thank you, Lindsay. I'm gonna pull you back in here, please. This is a great question. I mean, I've been struggling with a cough because I spent some time with my godchild, and children have a knack of, sneezing into your eyeballs. So as we move closer into winter, necessarily in South Africa, Paul is asking this. He's saying, in the event of a minor illness, sniffle, cold, flu, how long should you rest for? What's the recommended process for getting back into training? Can you pick up where you left off, or should you take a few steps back and ease back into things? And so I guess the second part of his question ties into with like a running niggle, but let's focus on it from an illness perspective necessarily.
Yeah, so look, it depends a lot on what you are ill with and how ill you get. And viral infections are much worse than bacterial infections. So really the severity of symptoms and how long they last will determine at what level you come back at. So if it's something minor like a head cold, 2-3 days of sick and not training, then all I would say is when you come back, you can slot straight into your program, but drop all the intensity out of it, and use your heart rate to determine how to run. Now, the only way you can effectively do that is if you have a good idea of what your easy run heart rate is pre-illness. So if you know what that is, it makes it much easier to come back. Now, if you get quite sick and you the symptoms are quite severe and you feel really weak, and then you're coming back, then you do need to take a few steps back and take approximately 2 weeks to build back up to full steam. Again, moderating the intensity using heart rate is the best way to go. And you'll feel when you're returning to normal because your pre-illness training paces and heart rate will match up. So when you're training to heart rate just after being ill, you will be slower than you were before you're ill. You haven't lost fitness. It's just your body working through and getting rid of the last of that illness, and in particular if it's a virus, that post-viral fatigue. And if you train that way, you put yourself at low risk for reinfection, at low risk for cardiac damage, and you will return quite quickly. So generally you bounce back really fast. The exception to that rule is the C word. So if you do pick up COVID, it becomes very important to train to heart rate, and that sometimes takes longer. Not in all cases. 90% of COVID cases are resolved completely within 2 weeks, and you will return to pre-COVID levels. Your heart rate and pace matching up within 2 weeks. There's a small percentage that go beyond that.
Sorry, talking about illness. Linz, while you're on, Bungani's got a question here saying resting after a marathon, does it literally mean you don't do anything? Yeah. And I guess some people are qualifying, some people are training marathons. Let's just give the definition between the two there.
So look, if you run a training marathon and you run it at the absolute fastest planned Comrades pace, you'll be training normally, carry on the next week, no issue. If you race a marathon, you're going to be sore. Typically 48 hours is the peak of that soreness. If you are a first-time marathon, you've really raced it, that can be day 4. But for most people, it's day 2, and that's why I say at least 3 days of nothing. From day 4, you can start doing some alternate forms of exercise like cycling, swimming, very light strength training, and after a week, you can get back to it and start running again. So the one is if you're racing, the other one is if you do it as a pure training run, you can probably just keep on going. If it's your first race, you definitely don't want to start running until that peak pain passes. In other words, the legs start to feel better. So if that's at day 2 and you're feeling better on day 3, then I'd say day 5, 6, or 7, you can probably go out for a light jog. If that day is day 4 and you only start feeling better on day 5, then it would be day 9 or 10 that I would start running again. But before that, you can do some cross training.
Awesome, thank you. I know we are sort of finishing up on time, but let me try squeeze in one or two. This is definitely novice webinar, so I want to ask these questions, Linz. Maud is asking here, please can you tell us about the cutoff points and times so we can start working towards those now, especially because the finishers will likely be up in batch H and starting on the back foot. And just to follow on with that, Zukile is asking, the race starts at 5:30, but since we're in the last batches, what happens to the cutoff times if you only cross the line at 5:50? Yeah. So should novice runners be tackling these cutoff times from now? Should they be thinking about that?
I'll have a look now and see if the cutoff times are on the Comrades website, but they often change one or two of those points. So yeah, the limits and cutoffs. So if you go onto the Comrades website, race info, rules and info, you can scroll down and you will get all the cutoff times, the runoff, the running time, the time of day, kilometers to go, kilometers done. So you can go on there, get that, and you can start planning ahead for that. So absolutely a good idea. And to answer the second question, it does impact. So because we don't want runners screaming out of the start in a full-blown panic and trying to make up the 8 to 12 minutes. So you won't lose 20 minutes at the start. You'll lose a maximum of 12 minutes. But you do need to make it up. So Comrades has factored that in. And so effectively, they only expect you to make up a little bit, and only have made up the full time actually right towards the end. So it is factored in that you're going to lose that. However, you don't get given an extra 12 minutes. So if you take 8 minutes to cross the finish line, that means that you've got 11 hours and 52 minutes to finish Comrades. And in my very last webinar, honestly, everyone who's on this webinar needs to register for the next webinar, because my very last webinar, I will tell you how to save 15 to 20 minutes on race day. And that is critical for people who are starting in H batch. It's very important for people who are starting in G batch.
Awesome. Yeah. So register for that. Okay. Nikki, I'm going to ask you your last question. Then Linz, I'll ask you your last question. I know we've gone a little bit over the 30 minutes here, and then we can call it from there. So, Nikki, Mandela's asking, please, can you also advise about supplements? Which one should I use if there is?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and it's not a quick one. So thanks for that. But it all depends on the goal of which you're struggling with. So if recovery is a problem, and that's what you're struggling with, I would do a recovery supplement, which is usually a carbohydrate protein mix. If it is energy that you're struggling with, that you just need to get more energy into the body that you can't keep up, that will be a meal replacement. And then if it's a supplement whilst on the road, that would be a carb predominant supplement. So we're going to have a little bit more detail about this to determine what the goal is with the supplement use.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki. Last point from you, Nikki, before we say goodbye to you. Anything you want to say before you say cheers? I think
what I want to say. I just don't underestimate what training the gut means for your day on Comrades Day. I really, really want to emphasize that train the way you're going to run that day, because the gut is fully trainable. So everybody that's struggling with slushy stomachs, stomach aches, stomach pains, you have to train until you don't feel those symptoms anymore. Don't just stop the nutrition because you feel it once. And good luck for everybody out there. Enjoy your eating. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. Linz, now I've lost that question, but I know what it was. It was around, if people are, here. Sharice is asking a similar one. So she's saying, as training starts in March, when should someone who is just aiming to finish plan to qualify? There was another question earlier around, okay, well, I haven't yet qualified. Qualifying ends in May, but when should I really be getting this qualifier in? When is the optimal kind of time?
So it does depend on exactly when you decided to train for Comrades, and how experienced you are as an athlete. So if you're a full-blown novice and you only started training in January, you're probably looking at qualifying quite late. And I would say somewhere between the middle of April and that first week of May. If you're a little bit more experienced, or you started this process in June last year, then you're probably looking to qualify between now and the middle of March. So those are kind of the two scenarios, and there are things in between. Again, on the Comrades website and the coachperry.com, literally step by step, and in that will give you a good idea when you should qualify. yeah, when the webinar ends, they're going to be directed to a page that'll literally take them to the Coach Parry website. Look, the advantage of being on there is that if you fall somewhere in between and you aren't ready for a marathon and you need to adjust the plan, where you're going to go to, how you're going to get that advice, well, you'll get it on the Coach Parry platform. But really, that's why what I said is you want to qualify as early as possible, but the most important thing is qualify when you're ready, because you only want to do it once. So if you're aiming to finish the race, you don't want to put in that kind of effort 2 or 3 times in the build-up. So you want to make sure that you're actually genuinely ready to qualify. Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. Just a note on the upcoming webinars, as Lindsay mentioned. These are all really, really important. If I'm not mistaken, the 10th of May one is your race prep. On the 12th of April, we've got a women's or ladies seminar, which is going to be awesome. But yes, register for all of these. Sorry, I think the 24th of May is your race prep run. Sorry, I missed that one. But either way, you are going to get value from all of these. So register for them. I think, yeah, as Lindsay said, when this page closes, you will get redirected to those pages. You can also get this information on the Comrades website. So, yeah, from my side, let me just say thank you very much. I always enjoy these. Don't forget about your strength training. It's one of those things that you don't necessarily always see the benefit straight away, but I can promise you that it is really going to change your race. So yeah, please do that, and that free strength plan will really do you wonders as well. Okay, Linz, yeah, I'm going to leave it with you. Last word from you, and then you can call it for us. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Yes, thanks to all the speakers, and thank you very much to everyone for joining us. It was a really nice full room, lots of chatter in the chat. Loads of wonderful information. You will get a recording of this, so if you can't remember 2.5 hours worth of information, you can watch it again. And as Adele said, there is a lot of information in here. Apparently, there is enough for you to finish third at Comrades, which is like really awesome to hear. Thanks a million to Adele for coming and inspiring us. It was a great talk, and good luck, everybody. I'll see you on the road. Hopefully see you at the road shows. And if we don't cross paths before, make sure you come and say hello to myself and the team at the Comrades Expo in Durban. Good luck and enjoy.